Notes up. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. It's DevOps Summit time. So live today, live to the audience. This is fantastic. I'm excited about this panel. This is one of the best panels I think I've had at the Cloud Expo, DevOps Summit, Things Expo, everything Expo here. So what we're talking about today is about the resurgence of ops and their role in DevOps. This is something, a topic very close to my heart. Because DevOps has been focused for a long time on optimizing the delivery pipeline. Now, increasingly we see that meaning automation of software development processes. So we see things like CI/CD, continuous delivery, application release automation, pipeline management, but we're seeing a lot of new approaches coming out for ops. Containers, serverless, Kubernetes, a whole bunch of stuff around operations analytics, machine learning, artificial intelligence, all driving a new way of running IT. So this is coming up to a very interesting point in our world, and these worlds are coming together, and I'm interested to find out from these expert panelists, what does this all mean for the IT operations teams in a DevOps context? So I'm going to briefly introduce our panelists from left to right. So we'll start with Sukhbir Dhillon, who is the CEO of AdTech. I'll give them a chance to give you a little bit more information about themselves in a moment. Just next to it is Jane Grohl, who is the co-founder and CEO of the DevOps Institute. We have Anne Hungate, who is the president of Daring Systems. Laurie McVitie, the principal technology evangelist from F5 Networks, and Derek Weeks, a vice president at Sonatype. So instead of me telling you what these people are and what they do, I thought I'd let them tell you. So firstly, Sukhbir, give us a couple of sentences. Who are you? What does your business do? What's your engagement here?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. AdTech is a DevOps managed service provider in a nutshell. We work with our customers and help them modernize their traditional application infrastructure and take them to the cloud.
Fantastic, thank you. Jane, tell us a little bit about yourself and the DevOps Institute.
Hi everyone, so I'm Jane Grohl, I'm CEO of the DevOps Institute. Long history in IT operations, going back to some screens that might have been black and green. Uh-oh.
That just means I'm running a panel now. I'm on time, it's all good.
Sounds like an alert. So the DevOps Institute is an association. We're community-based. Membership currently is free, so I encourage you all to join us. Very, very invested in understanding emerging practices and trends from a curation and a skilling perspective, and really delighted to talk about ops. Andy knows I have a long history in ops, but also a really fascination with some of the new operational practices that are emerging.
Super. Anne, tell us about yourself and about Daring Systems.
All right, my name's Anne Hungate, and I lead a consulting practice called Daring Systems. And what we do is help our clients improve their operations with a fact-based operations model. We bring transparency to software delivery and running IT shops so that they can couple it with communication and collaboration, have better environments. And our specialty is really helping teams get the most from their DevOps efforts.
Super. Laurie, unless you've been asleep for a couple of decades, we probably all know who F5 is, but tell us a little bit about yourself and F5.
All right, so I'm Laurie McVitie. I write, I speak, I strategize, I collect data, I look at research trends. I've been a developer, a network administrator, so I've spanned everything in my 20 plus years of being in IT. And for F5, I look at those trends and how they impact our business and what we're doing and how we develop the products that we deliver out to the market.
Fantastic. And last but definitely not least, Derek, tell us a little bit about yourself and Sonatype.
Yeah, so I'm Vice President of Sonotype. At Sonotype, I lead a lot of different efforts, including our industry research and a lot of our community efforts. As part of that, I also co-founded All Day DevOps, which is a very large DevOps community. But I have a lot of fun at Sonotype doing our annual research reports, annual surveys, et cetera. Sonotype is a DevOps tool provider, vendor in the space. We have solutions in the DevSecOps space as well. Many millions of your organizations out there, either in the audience or watching live, use our Nexus repository products and our open source governance products.
Fantastic, thank you. And I'm Andy Mann. I'm the Chief Technology Advocate for Splunk. Splunk is a data company. We make machine data meaningful, accessible, and valuable to everyone. That's my shameless plug for the day. First question to Laurie. You'll have to take a microphone, it's true. So Laurie, we hear about all the ops, right? We hear about DevOps, we hear about SecOps, we hear about Cloud Ops, about Web Ops, about Chat Ops, about Coffee Ops. Last night I was privileged to enjoy Pizza Ops. Where's network ops in all of this?
I know, they're left behind all the time, aren't they? It's a good thing. It's nice that you ask. So a lot of people think the network is still far behind in this whole ops revolution and doing automation, orchestration, moving to agile, using repositories, treating infrastructure like code. But in reality, they're actually doing it at pretty astounding rates, considering that, right, they're networking professionals. So they are adopting the technologies and the techniques and even a lot of the tools. I'm seeing GitHub Enterprise be popular with these guys, Jenkins. They write Python scripts. So they're really embracing this as a way to provide self-service outside of IT and to automate all those tasks that are, very repetitive and yet important to their jobs.
So they're actually getting engaged with automation, with this new tooling. They're keeping up by the sounds of it.
They're keeping up, yes.
Oh, that's very cool. So just pivoting on that, Derek, we hear a little bit about security everywhere, and we hear about DevSecOps. You mentioned DevSecOps. So what's your take on DevSecOps? What does this mean, and how are people actually taking that up?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about DevSecOps is that in some ways, it's shifting what was happening in, agile and waterfall practices in terms of security and bringing it into development practices. But I think more often, it's actually starting kind of a new wave of efforts to provide information to the developer in order to have them make better decisions about security up front as they're doing their coding. But I think from an operations perspective, it's also shedding light on things of what is in your infrastructure, what is there, what kind of open source components, what kind of containers are in your operational environment. Can you track and trace those? And through the automation that Laurie mentioned is you're using to roll things out or roll things back, you can actually track and trace what is there in production. So if you want to know, hey, there was this vulnerability that was just announced in this containerized application, did we ever use that? Well, your tooling should probably have an audit stream that tells you that instantly. Because you've automated, there's a lot more auditability of these environments in the operations side as well as the development side. So I think that's part of what's becoming more exciting about this is that operations teams can know what they're using, and they don't necessarily need the security teams to tell them or govern all of what's in operations, that they can actually play a role themselves.
Yeah, that's very. I've always believed that automation side. Everyone talks about automation in terms of speed and accuracy and getting humans out of the process, which is all great. But the audit trail, limiting people to doing known good processes at any given time. Speaking of known good process, Anne. You've been involved in quality assurance and quality issues for your amazing expertise and experience in that space. Tell us all a little bit about what's the intersection of ops and QA?
Well, this is a great time. I'm so glad to see ops emerge because ops and QA go hand in hand because really well engineered quality systems begin with the end in mind. And so it is starting with your ops, your NFRs, and really the strongest quality systems, which should be fully automated, are your end-to-end performance engineering systems and practices. So that's where these come together. And the other piece we're coming together and really leveraging DevOps and the tooling and the audit trails is for quality to tell the story to the operations teams and to track readiness. So that's how they're coming together, and it's an excellent opportunity for people in both domains.
And it's something that I believe that ops are where quality really comes into play in terms of the organisation. Customers first. A lot of the time, the customers are the people that see the problems first. If you release bad code, the second people to see it, it's ops. It's overnight.
And that's why ops quality team can be advocates for ops. They can be the arms and legs for ops. They can be the arms and legs for your architecture team that's establishing your standards and practices. So this is, again, the emergence of ops. The quality team becomes the number one ally of operations regulating the whole DevOps pipeline.
Yeah, absolutely. Jane, now you're an absolute ITIL guru. I read your bio. It's like 100 lines of amazing qualification. But you're also now involved, as you said, in revitalizing IT ops. So tell me, how is the ops in DevOps different from the ops in, say, ITIL or ITSM?
So when DevOps really started to cross into the enterprise, we started hearing terms like no ops. So anyone that's an ops person probably groaned and didn't hear the words no ops, heard no job, no respect, right? No future. And so that was really concerning. And for those that were in traditional ops in particular, relevancy was very important. And so if we look at some of the ITIL processes like change management, knowledge management, incident management, processes like that, they were built for very waterfall command and control. And so now we started to look at new practices, and Andy, we coined the term new ops. So forget no ops, take that out of your vocabulary. Let's start using the term new ops, because there are things that only humans can do, and new ops, it certainly does optimize human capabilities and human skills to do that. So the emergence of site reliability engineering, for example, which is a real job that real organizations are hiring, but more importantly, think about that nomenclature. It is an engineering mentality. So now we're suddenly all engineers. Operations moves into an engineering mentality. Certainly we were talking about networking. Now Google is breaking down, and Google's not the Oracle, no pun, of this, but now they're breaking down SREs into NREs, and so network reliability engineers and customer reliability engineering, and just looking at reliability engineering generally embraces a lot of the ITIL processes. So service level objectives, service level management, incident management, right? Looking at how we manage incidents, error budgets, really change management. So there is an evolution that's occurring that takes operations out of waterfall, injects an engineering mentality, makes it more agile, right? And then also, I think, upgrades ITIL processes, or let's not say ITIL processes, ITSM processes, so they're part of this SRE role, and at the end of the day, it's a real job, right? It's a real job that companies are very, very actively hiring, and that's really exciting.
So just quickly, ITIL and ITSM coexist with DevOps, or does DevOps replace ITIL and ITSM? So ITIL is just a series of books that's practices, right? So it's one set of ITSM practices. I think SRE is another newer set of ITSM practices, and speak to the same processes, but I think they speak to it in a much more agile and much more modern approach. So it doesn't even just coexist, it's part of a site reliability engineer's responsibilities. Capacity planning, latency, performance, all of those are ITIL processes or defined in ITIL, but they're really just managing services. Good one. Now, Sukhbir, as a solution provider, you're really a problem solver, but you see the whole cycle. So talk to us a little bit, what do ops need to most solve? When you think about the problems or the solutions you're providing, where do ops need really your help?
So I would say the high performance ops teams who are looking for help are not looking for help to reduce their work. What they're looking for help is how they can improve the customer experience. To give you one story of a really good ops team is GitHub. They got a big DDoS attack in late 2016, early 2017, I believe. And that was the mother of all DDoS attacks anybody ever got before in the whole history of internet. And guess what? It took GitHub 8 minutes to recover from that because of their bots. They did not know they were going to hit by it, but they prepared beforehand. And when that happens, they didn't have to do anything, their bot did everything. So a good ops team don't spend time in solving the problem. They spend time in preparing for solving the problem.
Ooh, I like that. People should tweet that out, by the way. Hashtag Cloud Expo, hashtag DX Expo, hashtag DevOps Summit, hashtag. Because I love that idea that you need to prepare. Is that where you're seeing in terms of the market, the site reliability engineering that Jane was talking about? These are the people who are preparing for the problems rather than reacting to them?
Exactly.
Nice, I like that. So let's move on a little bit. Jane, you mentioned DevOps, new ops, and I love you that you gave me a little bit of credit for that, but I take none. You coined the term new ops. You've written about new ops. I think we're very first published on that topic. I want to dive into that a little bit. I know you've teamed, thank you, with Splunk and with Rundeck to start up this event series, New Ops Days. Now, can you give us a little bit of an idea? What's that? Are we trying to replace DevOps Days, or what's that all about?
No, I think that when we look at the concept of new ops generally, in traditional DevOps, if you look at DevOps from the value stream, it stops at deployment. And so it's, agile scrum teams, they downstream to CI/CD, there's pipelines, button presses, either by itself or somebody presses it, you deploy and you start again. And there's a whole bunch of us that kind of stood on the mountain and went, now what? Right? Because it felt like deployment was the end game, and we talk a lot about value creation. So New Ops really looks at life before production, but particularly life after production, right? So it isn't just the service desk, it isn't just incident management. We are a software factory, and we have to keep manufacturing software on a regular basis, and whether you're hybrid or on-prem or cloud or whatever, there is a role for operations. And call it SRE, Starbucks calls it Starbucks Reliability Engineering. So that's their definition of SRE. So call it whatever you want. But there is a new way for operations. There are new transformational skills for operations. There's new practices. There's new excitement. I mean, no-ops just sounded dead. Like, it sounded like you should sing a dirge and, put operations to bed. And that was never the intent of no ops. The intent of no ops was to automate. We automate the rest of the world. We're really bad at automating ourselves. And so it was encouraging pervasive automation so we could go faster, but it just came out wrong. So new ops is a new way of working for operations.
Yeah, and I was talking yesterday in a hallway conversation. Hallway conversations at events like this are always some of the best tracks, the hallway track. And I was talking yesterday in a hallway track about this idea that when you go to the cloud, you don't even necessarily even lose your ops team. Right? Are you seeing that people still maintain their ops teams even as they go to cloud?
They have to maintain their ops teams. Jez Humble has a really great saying that says, let the machines do the boring, repetitive work and save people for higher level thinking and problem solving. And machines today can't be disruptive. I know we'd have a conversation about that. But our first New Ops Days, and I didn't answer your question, so forgive me. I don't want to hog the panel, but DevOps Days was really meant for up to and including deployment. And when you start to look at this population of operations folks, we had 250 people register for the first New Ops Days. And it has a very similar format. It's not meant to create kind of kingdoms, but it is a little bit of a different message. We have one coming up in Raleigh, that. So the one coming up in Raleigh, again, the expectation is creating a community for people that are just trying to not be disenfranchised.
Yeah, excellent. Actually, said that like this way, because Sukhbir, I want to take that on a little bit as well, the idea of the dev side and dev process. But there's also new processes in IT ops. Now, you obviously, like I said, involved in that whole software development lifecycle. Tell us a little bit about the new processes that you're seeing within development and also how that changes the processes and the structures in operations.
So what we do with our own development team is every time some new design comes into place, the first thing we ask is, do we need an ops person for this? Why do we need an ops person for this? I would rather have 2 developers than 1 developer and 1 ops. But how do you solve that problem? The first thing is, let's design our app in such a way so it can use certain things and move forward for developers to not rely on ops too much. Like one of the given example is Amazon created Lambda for Alexa. Now that same Lambda can be used for 5,000 different things. We actually launched an app for Confluence which provides spreadsheets in Confluence. And we also launched, a little over a year ago, we launched collaborative editing. So now to kick off a collaborative editing, you can either have heavy-duty servers out there, people are using it or not using it. What we did is we rather pivoted to Amazon Lambda. So every time somebody collaboratively starts, Amazon spins up a Lambda function somewhere out of the millions of the million servers. So we really don't have an ops team to monitor how many people are editing it. And as it scales, Amazon sends us notification, oh, your service is really doing really well. Good, we don't need ops people for it.
Yep, interesting. Now, Laurie, I'd like to turn to you. You've got a microphone in your hand, so I can't help but ask you the question. So we're talking here about not needing ops in some ways, talking about new technologies, serverless computing. We heard a great session here from David Linthicum about that earlier today. So things like containers, Kubernetes. We're doing a lot of things in IT to help devs do the ops. So tell us a little bit about how these sorts of processes affect the NetOps teams. Are the devs doing the NetOps as well?
Sometimes, and it angrifies the network.
Don't make the network
Don't
angry.
make them angry. Yeah, don't make the network angry. It is. I mean, there's pressure, but there's a lot of influence, right? If you look at the impact that things like containers and microservices have had on network architecture and how we architect the services that help applications do things like scale and security and performance, and how basically when the network didn't respond fast enough, developers went, yeah, well, we know how to code. And next thing you know, it's in Kubernetes or in the cloud. And these services are cropping up as individual services in these environments. So I think the network side saw that happening and said, wow, we may want to pay attention to these guys a little bit more and start looking at what they're doing. And they started finding ways to do it. There's been a concerted effort on the network side of the deployment pipeline to move toward, not just giving people a bunch of APIs and saying, here, go do this, right? We're moving to adopt things like more declarative methods of being able to define your infrastructure as code, to use things like GitHub and Jenkins, the tools that developers are using to be able to give them access so that you can still control what that network looks like. Ultimately, and there's still reliability issues. There's still COBOL apps out there that have to be delivered. So there has to be some measure of stability and reliability, but they're finding there's a lot of room for the kind of agile and perhaps more chaotic environment that is being wrought by more frequent deployments and delivery and those kind of things. So they're moving to support that by giving the control to the DevOps, but in a very more controlled fashion, if that makes sense. So they're providing the means to do it and then kind of getting out of the way.
And this is where the term engineering actually comes to play. And interesting, you mentioned the idea that there's the network reliability engineer. In my world, I feel like network engineer has always been a title. And you've had CCNEs and CCI, and engineering's right there in the certification. And so is this, actually, Derek, I'd like you to maybe address this, because I know at All Day DevOps, the community function event, the virtual 24-hour amazing conference that you've started, the community you've built, there was a big focus this year on engineering, on reliability engineering, site reliability engineering, as we've talked about a little bit before. Talk to us about some of the learnings you got maybe at All Day DevOps, some of your ideas about how that relates to DevOps in this new era of new ops.
Yeah, I think that as others have said on this panel, when you look at whatever you're building in terms of customer value, and it's out there for all of your customers to see, you have to be able to keep that up and running. You have to understand what are the measures around that. So some of the biggest lessons that came out of All Day DevOps, I think in that we had a site reliability engineering track for the first time this year, and I think a lot of people in the DevOps community were like, oh, what's SRE? I don't even know what it stands for. That's curious. Why don't I drop into that track? And there were all these people talking about, here are the measurements and the goals that we have for keeping this operational infrastructure up and running and what it means to the business. And they were like, wow, there are like metrics abound here about what our business should do and how we should respond to our customers. And I think that, beyond anything, actually came to light in that track, that a lot of people were like, are we measuring that? Like, no, we don't have anyone in our company that's looking at that. Like, we should do that. Yeah. We should have that. Like, this should be our next lunch and learn in the organization. Let's watch this, and we should assign someone, to do that, because we had, like, literally, there's no one in the business assigned to it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that was the eye opener for a lot of people in the community.
And it's interesting that for DevOps for a long time, we've had CAMs, right? Culture, automation, and what's that M? Is that measurement? Could be, but we don't really do it. I mean, Anne, you're a big believer in the power of data and how important data is. That's where the measurement hits the road. When we think about new things like observability, this idea that an application should have metrics and it should show the world what is happening inside that application. So we're looking at metrics, we're looking at logs, we're looking at trace data, the end of metrics. So tell me, how is this observability, how is data changing the way we build and run applications?
Well, data's at the heart of it, right? Because building software is an art based on a science. So the data lets us know, and if we start with the science, the data we need to know, it lets us know, are our systems working the way they should? Are they helping us grow the business? Are they helping us protect or enhance the brand? Are they helping us reduce risk? Are they helping us control cost? Because we build systems for very distinct reasons. When we put the data in there, we can test for it along the way. Those are the controls and measures we put in through the build cycle into the production cycle, and then we know, is the software helping us run our business the right way?
Yeah, good. I'm going to stay with you on that topic for a moment, because if this new tech is taking people out of the SDLC, we're putting in automation, we're putting in measurement, we're sometimes not having ops. Tell me, how do you gain trust in the system? I know it's something you're a big fan of.
The new tech is actually the old tech. That's the irony, is that there were some genius folks who solved these problems years ago. When software engineering was first really laid out as a profession, a lot of these problems were solved. So the end of the SDLC isn't the end, it's actually a return to the SDLC in a much simpler format, where we have the tools and processes that enable it. We used to rely on, PMs and Gantt charts to piece together the whole system, and now what we've done is take those thinking and the best practices from each of the domains and hook them together very intentionally. So we're getting back to pure SDLC.
Yeah, good one. Now, Sukhbir, when we think about that, when we think about connecting people together, and we think about building trust through automation, through the tooling, through the processes, talk to me a little bit of how you see that world of connecting teams together, of bringing Dev and Ops together, which is at the core of DevOps, which ultimately is a culture, not a tool. It's not a process. It's not a product you can buy. It's a thing that you do. Tell me about your work with your customers, how you bring these teams together and the concepts of dev and ops and maybe QA and network and other areas. How do you bring that together?
The funny part is with many customers we work with, to bring some kind of response time and SLA and everything, they tell each team that you're a customer of the other team, and they tell the other team, the other customer of the third team, and so on and so forth. The problem is that model sounds good, but it doesn't work in a way that when I feel that I am the customer of somebody else, I don't care about that individual. I care about my own self. And that's, the culture is being cultivated everywhere. Whereas what we try to tell everybody is, ops is your friend, dev is your friend, QA is your friend. If you design your app in such a way that Friday by 6 p.m. everybody goes home and get a beer, everybody wins. So everybody works together to make sure that they put everything in place, be it writing bots, be it designing the app in such a way, and anything else. To give you one quick example of our own system is, so we are Atlassian partner. Atlassian releases an app, a new version of an app pretty much once a week. We wrote an app for Confluence. We release once a week. So in a year, there are 52 versions of a Confluence, 52 versions of our app. You multiply that, that's a pretty large number. Now it runs on 4 different versions of database. You multiply that, now it's probably 64,000 different combinations you can come up with. So somebody from my ops team comes to me, it's like when a customer opens a ticket, to go through that whole combination and creating an environment takes me a whole day. It's like, all right, what option do you have? I can write a bot which can do this in 2 minutes. All right, go ahead, let's do this. So now we have a system, when a customer opens a ticket, we can get anything from this 64,000 combination in less than 2 minutes.
That's great. I really like that idea of when you start to think about everyone being a customer, then you have this attitude, the customer's always right, therefore I'm always right. But friends care about each other, and who doesn't want to go for a beverage with your mate after work? And so, yeah, writing a bot, get it done fast, you can both leave work at the right time.
Exactly.
I like it a lot. Now, so Derek, I want to move to you just quickly. The principles of supply chain management. I know I've read a lot about this in studies of DevOps. We've brought a lot from manufacturing, from Kanban to the end-on code to value stream mapping. Talk to us a little bit about how does this help bring teams together? Tell me about the connection of these manufacturing analogies into DevOps and how specifically they affect the ops side of the world.
Yeah, so it's a really good question. One question I have for anyone out there watching or listening in the audience is, how fast can you deploy a change in your environment, into production? When you have an idea, how fast can you move that into production? And part of it is, in manufacturing and supply chain terminology, I talked earlier today about all of the organizations, every one of your organizations, or if you're consultings or integrators, the organizations that you work with have a software supply chain that is bringing in open source components from different open source projects that you're using to assemble your applications. It's also bringing in containers. So if I containerize my application at Sonatype and put it up on Docker Hub, and all of you are downloading it and putting it into your operational infrastructure, that is a software supply chain. It is heavily, at work within your organization, consuming hundreds of thousands to millions of these components or container parts coming into your organization. Now, realizing that you're sourcing parts from suppliers, and each of these suppliers has different qualities. There are good suppliers, there are bad suppliers. There are suppliers with good track records and bad track records. So if I'm really bad at patching security vulnerabilities in my containerized application that you're relying on, you're probably going to go to another supplier that has a better track record of response time. And that's part of, we're pulling these things down and putting them into our operational infrastructure literally in seconds. because it's efficient. And we're racing toward this innovation, timeline or finish line that we have on the 2-week sprint or 10 deploys a day, what have you. So if you're reliant on all of these parts because they make you more efficient, you have to ask yourself, are you working with the highest quality parts within this software supply chain? And I think a lot of people are like, oh yeah, we're just happy we're bringing this stuff in, because we're so much more efficient. We downloaded 120,000 containerized apps this past month. Like, that's really cool. Were any of those good or bad? Or do you have any idea who those suppliers are? If you're not asking those questions, you basically converted yourself at the high level analogy into a manufacturer. You think Toyota just sources any part from the market that they choose to and they don't worry about quality? No, they have procurement teams that recognize who the suppliers are and who their sources are of bringing this information in, and they have quality gates along the way to help them with that. If you're not looking at that, then you could be deploying a lot of bad stuff. On the container side, there's research that I've noted throughout the year of the percentage, a very high percentage of containerized applications that go out with a lot of security vulnerabilities by default. And people aren't even paying attention. They're just grabbing what's convenient.
Yep. Wow. That's a sobering note, isn't it?
It gets worse if you give me if you get a few beers in me, I can tell you how bad it really is.
It's important stuff, though. As we go through this operational process, we start to delegitimize high levels of skill and discipline by saying, oh, there's a full stack engineer and they do everything. We really need to get back to the idea of at least T-shaped people, where they do have that depth of skill in security, that depth of skill in knowledge in operations, a depth of skill and knowledge in networking. And so this is a really important topic. Jane, just coming back to the idea of bringing people together, DevOps Institute, a professional organization bringing people together. Tell us about how you're able to bring some of the benefits of the dev discipline and the processes they use and the capabilities that the advancement that we've seen in development over the years, over the last few years. How do you bring that to ops as well?
So that's a great question. So at DevOps Institute, we curate a lot of practices. And one of the things that became very clear is that, first of all, when we start to look at DevOps from a skilling perspective, we accredit 7 certifications, no ninjas, gurus, masters, experts, none of the ambiguous. In today's day, if you're going to be an engineer, be a DevSecOps engineer, or be a test engineer, or be a continuous delivery architect, be something very, very real. And then when we also start to look at agility, which is I think what you're referencing, Andy, is that we use the term, I say agile, you say software engineering, right? And if you look in the dictionary under agile, it doesn't really say software engineering. Right? So it's more important to be agile than to do agile. Yep. And I think that's a message that really has to resonate throughout all of IT, that somehow this word agile has taken on a different connotation, and that if we look at what we're trying to deliver in DevOps from an association perspective, from a networking perspective, from a growth perspective, is that if you're not a software engineer, you still need to be agile, right? Think about what agile means from a body perspective, right? I'm not very agile these days. I was more agile 20 years ago, right? But you understand, I need to be agile. I don't need to do agile. And I think there's a mantra that we really have to carry through. DevOps Institute, we really promote that.
I like that a lot. Be agile, don't do agile. Laurie, we've just got a couple of minutes. We're going to finish with you before we wrap up. You, again, on the idea of bringing people together, you work a lot with both high-tech and more traditional enterprises and organizations. Bizarrely enough, IT seems to be the only place in the world where legacy is a bad thing. Tell me a little bit about the differences and how those two worlds can come together.
Can they?
Can they?
Usually the one is producing software that the other is consuming. No, we're starting to see, especially a lot of larger traditional organizations, right, have turned to using some of those faster moving high-tech organizations as not boilerplates, but as mentors, as examples of providers of technology that helps them actually move faster and deliver not just software faster, but everything, because their businesses are tied to that software now, whether it's supply chain or their ERP, or it's actually driving the manufacturing of whatever they're building. So they really need to get and be as agile as those high-tech companies. So that is a lot of how they are coming together, is best practices and learning how to do that. And in the other way, there's also a reminder, I think, from the large enterprises that, hey, we still do have things like COBOL and client-server apps out here that we have to maintain, and we're still developing and we're still using. And that has, in turn, taught I think, a lot of high tech to start producing more tools and technologies that help them bring that into this more, new ops and agile methodologies, and being able to use those to help deliver those legacy applications faster.
Good one. Well, that's just about all the time, but I do want to find out, Derek, first we'll start with you. Any final comments, and most importantly, where can people find you if they want to have questions later on?
The easiest place to find me on Twitter, Weeks Tweets. It's pretty easy to remember. I'm also on LinkedIn. Final thought, I think one thing we should all look at, going back to the supply chain issues, is I ask, how fast can you deploy changes into production? If you think about how fast your adversaries can move, especially when it pertains to DevSecOps and security, your operational infrastructure is under attack within 24 hours of new vulnerabilities being announced. If you cannot move changes into your operational environment within 24 hours, you are at risk for every hour, every day beyond that. So if you're deploying changes once a week, you're now vulnerable for only 6 days from the adversaries. So just as we're all trying to move faster, our adversaries are actually moving a lot faster than all of us out there, because they're deploying the same automation that you are. They just have different customers that they're serving.
That is great advice. Thank you, Derek. Laurie, final comments, and where can we find you to continue this conversation?
On the interweb. That newfangled Twitter thing.
You think it'll last, the internet?
I think it's a fad, and I think it's going to drop off pretty soon. So it's L McVitie on Twitter and just about every place else. I guess on the last thing to remember is don't forget your network, guys, right? I mean, everybody, they talk about DevOps and new ops and agile and security, and the network guys are just as important. Even when you're moving to the cloud or you're staying at home, it doesn't matter. There is still networking. Without the network, nothing moves anywhere. So, don't forget about them either. It's just as much important to reach out to them and try to include them and figure out how do we bring you in, as it is for them to actually reach out and embrace what you're doing as well. Yeah. So, inclusion, in the data center is important.
Excellent. Thank you, Laurie. Anne, final comments, and where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Ann Hungate, one word, or we have a lot of conversation going on the Daring Systems website. That's daringsystems.com. And my final thought is DevOps is not an if or a when. It's something you need to do right now, today. We got to collapse the software delivery supply chain, right? But do it with transparency. Know your numbers, because if you're going to get your teams to work together, it's a lot easier to have these empathetic conversations and to engage in a dialogue if you're dealing with facts and data and not so much emotions.
Brilliant. Love it. Thank you, Anne. Jane, where can we find you? What's your final thought?
So I'm not that hard to find. Sometimes I wish, no. So please go to DevOpsInstitute.com, join our community, it's free. We're running an upskilling survey right now, really trying to analyze the state of DevOps skills and really encourage you to fill that. Parting thoughts. Culture doesn't transform, and transformations take a long time. People transform, and people only transform when they're inspired to do so. So my really parting words, I say this at every chance I get, it's a great day to be in IT. Like, nowhere else are you actually paid to be disruptive, and are you paid to actually learn new things. So take advantage of that, because there's a lot of other professions out there that really are not encouraged to really be innovative, to find new ways of doing things, to compete with kids in garages. So really celebrate the fact that you're in a profession that wants you to grow. And if you don't take advantage of it, it's no one's fault but your own.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jane. And finally, Sukhbir, where can we find you? What's your final thought on this topic?
You can find me on Twitter. My handle is @TechSukhbir. Our @Tech is TEQ. We like messing up our names. Same way how our hosting service is called Code Factory. Instead of TORY, it's TORI. We like messing names.
I do. ANDIMANN.
And I couldn't say much better than what Jan said, that it's the perfect time to be in the IT world. Every day you come across things, you can do something better, and in fact, people who do something better, they get rewarded in a way, not only monetarily for themselves, but you get a good feeling that you changed multiple people.
Yeah, good one. Excellent. Thank you all. Sukhbir Dhillon from AdTech, Jane Grohl from the DevOps Institute, Anne Hungate from Daring Systems, Laurie McVitie from F5 Networks, and Derek Weeks from Sonotype for the DevOps Summit at Cloud Expo and DX Expo. I'm Andy Mann at ANDIMANN on Twitter. Please check out Splunk.com. Please thank my panelists for a great session.